I used to say, I smelled my menstrual cycle coming through the room, or I felt her enter the room. For that time, we might do the BirthFit basics. We might do some walking, general basic strength training. We're not going to get inverted. We want to utilize the downward energy and just support the body's natural processes. Oftentimes, there's a shift in energy that comes around day 3, day 4, and that's when we may start to add a little bit more in. I kind of view it as a mountain where ovulation is kind of the peak of the mountain. And as you go through more of the follicular phase to get to ovulation, your energy is picking up. And so that's a great time for strength training and pushing yourself again. And once you get to ovulation, that's game day.
Lindsey, you own a company called BirthFit, and in the name BirthFit is this word fit. You work specifically with women, although I'm sure you have male clients as well, but your focus is really on getting people prepared for pregnancy, helping them exercise through pregnancy. You yourself are very, very, I would say, very fit. But my first question for you is, what does fitness mean? Like, what is this fit thing? Everybody talks about fitness, but what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so I feel like this question could be a whole episode for a podcast. And it goes back kind of to the origins of BirthFit. And, at the time I was like trying to come up with a name for my doula chiropractic fitness services that I wanted to put all under one umbrella. And I kept doodling and the words birth, fit kept coming up. And, I asked myself that same question, fit, what does it mean to be fit? And so I go to Google, I go to the internet, I'm like, what is fit? What is fitness? And you might like this. The thing that came up first was the CrossFit Journal. And it was the article, What is Fitness? And they were the only people that had anything, that made any sense to me about what is fitness. And they defined fitness, on kind of like 3 different scales. One was the sickness wellness continuum. The other was like the hopper model, if you can pull a workout out of the hopper and be able to do it. And then paying attention to the 3 energy pathways.
Right.
And so I really resonated with that. And then also at the time, I was a CrossFit coach. My ex and I owned a gym in Venice, California. And I was just like, this is brilliant. And so I was in CrossFit, I was being a doula, and I was a chiropractor at the time, or still am. And I wanted to, this just made so much sense to me. And I wanted to share this with women that, okay, CrossFit, or, what is fitness? They define fitness, and being prepared, being general, having general physical preparedness for a task, for life, whatever. And I wanted to relate that to birth. And so the birth came in front of this word. And, for me, it's being capable, having the ability to be ready for the unknown that birth offers and that the whole birth experience is. And we don't know, how long birth is going to be, how long labor is going to be. Could be 3 hours, could be 3 days. It's definitely going to require all the energy pathways. It's definitely going to require, all planes of motion. And it's something that you have to surrender and adapt to. So that's kind of the origin of the word BirthFit.
I remember that article. So I started with CrossFit. I started back when I was in, I had just finished, if we finished college, my wife and I went to Korea to teach English for a year. We weren't married at the time. We came back and we actually broke up. We met when we were 16, and I used Ironman distance triathlon to run away from the pain of losing this person who I still love so dearly. We never fell out of love, but I down the road from me, actually, I was working at a shoe store, like a fitness shoe store, where you fit people how to, for shoes and all that. And this guy came in and was like, "Hey, I need a pair of cross training shoes." And I was like, "Well, what are you trying to do?" And he was like, "Well, I'm doing CrossFit and this and that." And I had no experience with this, but my friend had overheard. He was also working at the store. He had overheard. He was like, "You haven't heard about this CrossFit thing. This is getting really big." And it was maybe 2007, 2008. So it was fairly early in the whole CrossFit thing. And so I was in the back getting this guy a pair of like cross trainer shoes. Like I didn't really know what cross training even was. Like I played sports my whole life. I never thought of it as like you have a
Totally.
special type of shoes for doing a variety of things. So I started talking to this guy and he's like, well, we're opening a gym down on, it was South Park Road. It was like a mile from my house, like where I was moved back in with my mom and my dad at the time. And so he said, just come and check it out. And I was their first member. Like they didn't even have any members. They had like an actual box. So for those who don't know, CrossFit
Yeah.
gyms are often referred to as boxes, and they have a workout of the day, a WOD on the wall. And I was kind of like a scrawny runner type. I did some climbing but they got me training there, and I became a trainer within like a year I didn't even do the level 1 certification because I just was so dedicated to this. I was like doing 2 workouts a day. I was doing my Ironman training, and I was getting so strong and so lean, and my shoulders were getting bigger and my back was getting stronger. And I remember on the wall, they had a poster that had from a 2002 CrossFit Journal article. And I'm going to read that because this is actually, I think, relevant to how we all in this sort of fitness community, especially if we came out of CrossFit, fitness in 100 words kind of
Oh,
describes
so
the
good.
lifestyle. So, and you can like buy these posters online.
Yeah.
Fitness in 100 words: eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts: the deadlifts, clean and squat, presses, clean and jerk, and snatch. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics: pull-ups, dips, rope climb, push-ups, sit-ups, presses to handstand, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds. Bike, run, swim, row, etc. Hard and fast, 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn, and play new sports. And that's what CrossFit is. Like that's the whole thing. Now it has become something
Oh
a
my
little bit
gosh.
different. Like these are hulking adolescents now that are throwing 300, 400 pounds of weight overhead. At the time I was like pretty competitive, but then when the
Yeah.
snatch and the clean and jerk became like the way to differentiate yourself, I broke my collarbone doing
Oh,
something stupid in Thailand, and my snatch career was left in the dust.
done.
But
Done.
when you hear
Yeah.
those words, does that still kind of conjure up how you think about how to
Oh,
prepare yourself for pregnancy?
yeah. It still resonates with me. And I think the philosophy of CrossFit is just so brilliant.
What's up, everybody? It's Nathan, the host of your favorite podcast, the only OBGYN podcast that matters, the Holistic OBGYN podcast. So here's 3 things that you can do right now. Number 1, if you like these episodes, if you like the show, share it with people you love. They're probably going to like it too. The second is to support our sponsors. I've aligned myself with brands that make the best, highest quality products out there, all pertaining to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, parenting, you name it. Support them, let them know that you're paying attention. And then third is that I want you to take a moment and click like. Let the Googleverse and the interwebs know that you're listening, that you're paying attention to the Holistic OBGYN podcast. Believe it or not, this really, really, really matters. So it's so important that I'm just going to take a brief pause right now. I'm going to let you go and click that like button. So just don't mind me. I'm just going to wait. All right. You've done it? Perfect. Thank you so much. I think I've said enough. Let's get back to my conversation.
And like you said, it's become this huge, its own sport, the spectacle, and the top tier athletes of it look like superheroes.
Yeah, they do.
And I mean, they are superheroes, but
Yeah.
you know, it's funny. I started in a similar way to you, where I was in chiropractic school and I was interning, and somebody came in and they were like, I injured my shoulder doing a snatch, and I was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just started prying more and more, and I wanted to learn more. I didn't want to be the chiropractor that would say, don't do that, that's bad for you, or don't do the deadlift because it injures your back. What I wanted to be was the chiropractor, the coach, the instructor that showed people how to move correctly, that showed people it wasn't the deadlift that hurt your back, it was your shitty movement patterns. Let's fix those. Let's embrace a little curiosity with our bodies.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's kind of the origins of it. I grew up, playing soccer and tumbling as a cheerleader. So CrossFit really resonated with me as being like the most efficient way to train in an hour's time. And then I could go be a chiropractor, be a doula, do something, and so that's kind of how I started. But It's funny to look back on that time, like 2008, 2009. I think the last time I actually participated in a CrossFit competition was like 2012 maybe, and that was like a
It's a
regionals.
decade ago.
Yeah, yeah. And there's no way that anybody would ask me to be their team member these days, or I could make it on that stage
Me
anymore.
neither. Me neither. No way. I mean, and actually, I've also experienced enough injuries now where I actually have dialed it back to the
Yeah.
point now where I'm just focusing on form and posture and spinal
Yes.
alignment. And I don't know if you plan to have kids someday, but when you have children, things just slow down. Like you have to, instead of pushing 6 days a week,
Oh,
as Greg Glassman
absolutely.
said, it could be 2 days where you're focusing on the proper shrugging technique or like a kettlebell swing or something like that. And you're just
Hmm.
focusing on tucking the pelvis, aligning the spine, and engaging the lats, like the side muscles of
Hmm.
your back. And that might be enough for your body to be nourished through the movement without pushing it to the limits as if you're going to go to the CrossFit Games. So as people listen to
Absolutely.
this, I think a lot of people have become intimidated by this whole CrossFit thing. So I want to ask you, for people who are listening, before they shut this off and take their earbuds out, for somebody who might be intimidated by CrossFit, where does somebody start? Like they've just, let's say, decided they want to have kids. They know that they have a little extra body weight. Maybe they have a little
Mm.
extra fat. Maybe they're pre-diabetic and it's impacting their fertility. Where does somebody start?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what I want to share is like the origins of the word birth fit, like the CrossFit Journal article really resonated with me.
Yeah,
But like you just mentioned, the 6 days a week programming, that did not resonate with me.
right.
The crushing of adrenals and staying in that high intensity zone all the time
Yeah.
just creates a lot of overstress for one's nervous system, just super taxed. And so, I was seeing this, and then here comes my chiropractor mindset, and then my birth mindset. And I'm like, wait a second. So I started questioning a lot of things. I started digging a lot. And, what I discovered was, and more people are talking about this now, is that as far as research goes, there's not a ton of research done on women, especially those that are pregnant or postpartum. It's really hard to get research done on women. Why? Because we menstruate and we change, and we're different
Mm,
every single day
mm-hmm,
of the month.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And most of the research out there has been done on college age males. And so while, a
And
CrossFit,
actually, they tend to be athletes as well, like college
yeah,
sports
yeah,
programs. Like, see, these are already well-trained 18 to 24-year-old men
yes.
who can go all day, like
They're
hard all day.
CrossFitters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, this is kind of not making sense. And at the time, I thought it was beautiful that, women's sports, women's athletics was beginning to come to light in the mainstream media, having women look not just the frail, skinny type, model type. And so I thought that was really empowering. And I just wanted to give women tools for training that they could take to their gym, they could take to their coach, or their coach could take our course and have some education and be a little bit empowered about coaching a female with a menstrual cycle, about coaching a woman that's going through pregnancy, because she does not need to do the WOD that's on the board Monday through Friday. So with somebody that's completely new to fitness, I love that. That makes me just smile, like grin and ear
Yeah.
to ear. And I welcome them in BirthFit. We have a ton of programs, options that are no equipment, minimal equipment, and you can start anytime, really. So if you're preconception, I would say like this is the best time to start because you're getting to know your body, you're getting to know your cycle,
Totally.
and you're going to train differently. And what BirthFit is nervous system supported general strength and conditioning. So that doesn't, we don't say, we're high intensity interval training. Some days might have a little bit of high intensity interval training. Other days might be exactly what you just said. It might be working on skills or, more of accessory type of movements.
Yeah.
Maybe it might be the BirthFit basics and a long walk. All of our programming is constantly varied, similar to CrossFit, but it takes into account the nervous system and the female cycle, and the different chapters and weeks and trimesters within pregnancy. I'll share, excuse me, a story. One time, this was super early on in my career, and I had this woman come to me, and she was about 35 weeks pregnant, and she was like, I decided I want to be birth fit. I said, okay.
Oh, I love that. It's like a billboard for you.
Yeah.
I want to be birth fit.
Yeah. I said, okay, well, let's start. So, minimum, we started twice a week training at the gym, and it was an hour. But literally, we started with the training barbell for presses, and it was 15 pounds, so just going through that full range of motion. We did wall push-ups. We did squats to a box, and we didn't run, we walked, we carried things, and my programming met her where she was at. And she ended up having one of those 3-day labors, and her midwife told her, and she took this away from the birth experience. The midwife told her, hey, if you weren't in such great shape, you probably wouldn't have made it through this. And she was like, I told you, I had to be birth fit. So I take that and I share that with anybody that's like, oh, I'm 27 weeks. I might as well not train today. Or, I haven't trained at all during my pregnancy. No, you can start anytime. It's absolutely fine. So she's a funny one. And, I take that story with me. I share that with a ton of clients. The other thing I'll say is early on in my BirthFit journey, when I was in Los Angeles, I was working at 2 different birth centers. I was working at a birth center on the west side with a nurse midwife, and then on the east side with a professional midwife. And then I became connected with Dr. Stu and some others. And there was a big misconception going around, and the midwives would ask me, this woman, she was too fit. She got too fit, and her pelvic floor was too tight to give birth. And, that got me thinking, and this was right along the same time as I was trying to define birth fit and what it meant. And for me, when I dug deeper, what I realized was these women were not training for birth. They were not in-season training for birth. They were doing the same program that they had been doing. And so they're literally training, in this direction, but birth is this path. So they're literally doing the WOD of the day, or they're still running, their same mileage that they ran before. They're still cycling or spinning the same way they had done before. And, as I mentioned earlier, birth happens in all planes of motion. It's not just going to happen in that sagittal plane of motion. So they did not have access to, let's say, their whole pelvic floor. Their whole pelvic floor did not, probably was not able to eccentrically contract. It was only able to concentrically contract in a certain way.
Can you explain that, Lindsey, for people who don't understand eccentric and concentric?
Yeah. So if we're talking, this is the easiest, the bicep muscle, concentric would be shortening of the muscle, shorten contraction.
So flexing it like Popeye.
Popeye muscles. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Eccentric is you're flexing, but maybe there's a band, or you're not flexing. There's a band over here, but you're slowly going through that full range of motion, but you still have that muscle activated. There's still that muscle tension there. And then isometric. So
it would be like doing a deadlift, picking up a couch, and instead of dropping the couch, you actually set the couch down gently.
Absolutely. Yeah. You lower it to the ground. It's funny you say that, because that's one of our big rules is you never drop the deadlift from the top.
I have coached that. I've coached that for at least 10 years for people who come to me for coaching. And don't come over and help me move my refrigerator if you're going to drop it when we get to the the driveway.
You're missing out on all those gains. That's what I'll tell women, and even guys that would take our courses before. They're like, oh, that makes sense. That's where the most gains are, is that lower down the eccentric contraction.
Let me add to that as well, like a pull up. If you don't believe me, do a
Yeah.
pull up and then drop out of the pull up. Do a pull
Yeah.
up and now lower yourself slowly for up to 10 seconds. You
Yeah.
could do one of those and get more of a back workout if that's what you're going for. It's not
Yeah.
just a back workout, but
That's
you'll need more recovery time after doing that eccentric lowering
yes.
phase than you will doing 100, no, maybe not 100, but 10, butterfly pull-ups or
Yes.
whatever. Do the
Yes.
eccentric and you're going to get way more benefit from it.
You're
Yeah.
gonna build so much pull-up strength just doing the slow lower downs. Like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah. Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So
Sorry for
that's
interrupting.
what,
Continue.
no, that's totally fine. So that's, what I was discovering as I was like digging through the layers. I was like, okay, this woman was, a competitive runner. This woman did her soul cycle classes all the way through. This woman
Yep.
stayed in her, CrossFit class 5 days a week. There was no altering training for the season that she was in. And, if you look at an Olympic sprinter or a thrower, they adjust their training for the season that they're in. And, their training 4 years out from the Olympics looks different than 6 weeks out from the Olympics, than a
Yeah.
year out from
Right.
the Olympics. So
Right.
that's
Right.
that's kind of where I was going with that. And once I started like unpacking this for the midwives I was working with, they're like, oh, that makes sense. I was like, the programming we do is not that. There's a mind body connection piece, there's strength, there's a conditioning piece, then there's a mind body reflection piece. We take each woman through kind of I call it a polyvagal theory sandwich. Like, we talk to the body, we see how the body's feeling today, then okay, we push the boundaries of the nervous system, explore the range of motion of the nervous system, and then we come back down to remind the body that she's safe and it's okay to be here, which
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
get that in any of those, like spinning, running, CrossFit, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's one thing I want to go back to real
Yeah.
quickly, and then I want to jump ahead to talk a little bit about programming around the menstrual cycle. The first, though, is that we, as a culture, I think that we see exercise as a way of losing weight and getting abs. And that's the only reason you should move. And if that's not your
Yeah.
goal, then you don't have to exercise. Or if you're, proud of your body and this and that you shouldn't exercise. You can
Yeah.
be proud, I don't care what you look like. I want you to know how your body feels when it moves in certain ways. So when we get to that time when you're in your, third trimester, if you don't know your body, it's going to feel very, very weird for you to have these sudden, incredibly profound changes happening in your pelvis, in your lumbosacral spine. The body changes quite dramatically as it starts to open up and improve the diameter, let's say, of your pelvis, especially as that baby's coming out. So to your point about women who are not training for birth, I have actually seen this as well. And I was covering a practice in Encinitas. It's a really well-known practice. Dr. Kapitanakis' practice down there. He and Dr. Stu were really good friends, and he had asked me to cover his practice. And while I was covering it, I did notice that he has a lot of yoga practitioners and Pilates instructors that come to him for their low risk, they're healthy,
Yeah.
but their pelvises in their back and their abdomen, it's like locked in place. So when they were giving birth, we actually did see a protraction, meaning a prolonged
Yeah.
labor process. I'm not saying that shame and blame, but I am saying that had we customized your training to
Yes.
this upcoming birth, that perhaps we actually would have had some more relaxation in the pelvis. But instead, you put your hand in there, like to do a cervical exam, and it's like tight, like the pelvis itself
They're
is
not
really
letting
tight.
you in. Yeah.
They're not letting me in. Yeah, it's because
Yeah.
they've been training this sort of muscle memory to keep everything tight at all times,
Yeah.
including their
Yeah.
abs. But a big part
Yeah.
of I just had a really a very fit individual. I'll just say she and her partner just had a baby, but in that third trimester, I reminded her. I said, "Now's not the time to be doing sit-ups, back extensions, and all this. Right now, actually, I want you to focus on breathing, full belly breathing to
Yes.
relax that abdominal wall." What I find is when you tell your abdominal wall to relax, your pelvic floor actually relaxes as well, so that whole
Absolutely.
chamber can fill up when you contract your diaphragm down into the into this closed container. Julie Wiebe, a physical therapist up in LA, talks a lot about this as well. She calls it piston breathing. I know that term is thrown around, but anyways, that was the first thing. And then the second thing I wanted to get into was perhaps maybe we can talk a little bit about the adrenals.
Yeah.
And how might you counsel a person, let's say they're not pregnant yet, about exercising during their menstrual phase of their, let's say, menstruation versus ovulation during their cycle, because I do think the adrenals kind of come into play there.
Oh, totally. Let's come back to breath too in a minute.
Please do. Well, why don't we put a pin and we'll come to breath after.
So yeah, I definitely think training needs to be adjusted to one's menstrual cycle. I know there's some big organizations out there like the Whoop Band that has said push through recently, or it's okay to push through. But if you look at like traditional cultures around the world and how they honor and respect the menstrual cycle, there's a whole kind of slowing down, going inward, a big reflection time for especially those first 3 days of the bleed, and even probably a day or two prior to the bleed. And if one's in touch with their cycle, they will feel this coming. They will feel this energy shift. I used to say, I smelled my menstrual cycle coming through the room, or I felt her enter the room, and I knew she was like around the corner. And for that time, we might do the BIRTHFIT basics, we might do some walking, general like basic strength training, but we're not going to push our bodies to do any sort of PRs. We're not going to get inverted. We want to utilize the downward energy and just support the body's natural processes. Oftentimes there's a shift in energy that comes around day 3, day 4, day 5, just depends on your cycle. And that's when we may start to add a little bit more in. And, for some women, they feel great and they feel like, oh, I can run again, or I can do heavier lifts. For others, they're a slower transition into that. I kind of view it as a mountain where ovulation is kind of the peak of the mountain. And, as you go through more of the follicular phase to get to ovulation, your energy's picking up. There's more estrogen. And so that's a great time for strength training and pushing yourself again. And once you get to ovulation, that's game day, that's performance day.
Right.
And then you go through the luteal phase. And I look at the luteal phase kind of as like 2 chapters within one. And, the first half of the luteal phase, you probably still feel good. You might play games with yourself like, I don't feel like working out today. At least I know I do. And, I just have to remind myself to stay consistent, show up and usually I would feel better after training. But the second half of the luteal phase, that's where I give myself permission to slow down, to take a recovery day instead of a training day. And, if I don't feel like pushing myself for a 25-minute conditioning piece, it's okay to cut it to 10. It's okay to skip it, embrace that flexibility.
For years now, I have been, it's like I paid for a banner to fly behind an airplane and like nobody's looking, but I've been saying this since I was in residency, because I was a pretty high level performer, for most of my life as an athlete, as a person just going to the gym and seeing results. Like I liked pushing it. I really did. But I was noticing that, I was taking care of all women and they were pushing it. And many of them looked good, but they were pre-diabetic. They had no energy, but they were pushing through it. And I do think you mentioned the Whoop device, and sorry, Whoop, that I'm about to scold you, but
we still like it.
Yeah. I mean, these devices, they can play a role.
Totally.
But what I think ends up happening is because we rely so much on these feedback devices to tell us you're recovered. HeartMath this is like an old technology. You're a red or a yellow or a green with regards to is it good to do a high intensity workout today. the problem with that is, and the Whoop devices and everything else, and even experts, so to speak, who are telling you it's okay to do it or not to do it, is that if your body is telling you, I'm not so sure a really hard workout is good today, but the Whoop is like, hey, you're good to go. Push through, baby.
Yeah,
Like
you're recovered.
that.
Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Then what happens is that intuitive sense about where your body's at and how you're feeling, that actually doesn't serve you in pregnancy because you've
Right.
been listening to this little device on your wrist. So I think we need to balance these technologies out with just getting
Hmm.
to know our bodies and our mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being a little bit better. If you walk into the gym, and I
Yes.
talked to your B community about this just the other day, if you walk into the gym and you feel like you have to sit down on the bench and like pump yourself up to do some
Yes.
overhead presses or something, maybe that's a day where you, instead of doing something really hard, you just go through some active recovery movement and, you know, small sets, low reps, but just working on the form. You can still do heavy weights,
Yes.
but trying to nourish the yin as opposed to the yang,
Yes.
you know, around
Yeah.
that menstrual period, perhaps.
Yes. And I love that you said that because, I think, and I know you're you do some acupuncture, I believe, some
I
Chinese
don't do it,
medicine.
but I have a lot
No?
of Chinese medicine
Okay.
friends. Yeah. I feel like Chinese medicine has so much I have so much to learn from Chinese
It's
medicine. So,
great. And I mean, it's
yeah.
worked for centuries. Um,
A
I
millennia,
think,
way, way, way
yeah.
predates us by thousands of years.
Before there was even the breath of us here.
Yes, yes,
um,
yeah.
I think cultivating that yin in the follicular phase is so important for conception. And, so often I'll do consults or women will come in preconception and they're like, I've been training CrossFit for this many years and I'm fine or whatever. My blood works, labs fine, whatever. Why am I not getting pregnant? And it's because they're not like, I truly feel it's because they're not honoring their cycle, their brain to body connection. There's such a disconnect from like literally here up. And one of the biggest things I kind of tell them is like start training with your cycle and specifically inside that follicular phase. I know you want to go hard in the paint. I know you want to hit it hard, but pay attention to the recovery days. Like if you have like 3 or 4 days on, make sure you have 2 or 3 days off. Go for a walk, do some yin yoga. Like
Yeah.
don't do power yoga, do something slow and intentional.
Slow the fuck down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're not motivated, if you wake, like you said, if you wake up in the morning and you're just like, then today might not be the best day to train.
Yeah. 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 Maybe you just do some inner work. You know, Paul Chek is he's a mentor and friend of mine. He has this term working in, if you go on a
Yeah.
long walk in the woods, that's going to serve you better on those days where you're not motivated, you're not well recovered, you didn't sleep well, maybe you already have kids and you're expecting another. I know what
Hmm.
that feels like. Those might be the days where you do some Tai Chi, some Qigong, a walk in the woods, you do some breath work, maybe you even do some like actual activity, but you're just like, I don't know, maybe you
It's
carry your
play.
daughter down the street. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
you play with them on the ground. Like that's still movement. It's still exercise.
Yes.
We can't build muscle when our bodies are not recovered from whatever
Absolutely.
happened the day before, whether it was a workout or a night out drinking, bad diet, you
Yeah.
didn't sleep, So let's be honest with ourselves. The blood work thing you brought up is another one of those biofeedback tools where people are like, I have normal blood work. Why am I not
Yeah.
getting pregnant? I'm like, because blood work is like 1/100th of what we're going to talk about infertility.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and the OBGYNs, God bless them. They're like, you're not fertile because of the blood work, or you're just fine fertile. You
Yeah.
should be getting pregnant. And I'm like, guys, like, as well as I that there is far more to this than a biofeedback device, blood work, or imaging, or
Yeah.
whatever else. There's far more to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. People always ask us at BirthFit, well, how do you monitor things? Especially in training, because there's that, age old phrase of like, don't get your heart rate above 130, 120,
Sure.
like any
Sure.
of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And, for the longest time, we would tell people it's your intuition. It's your
Yeah.
intuition. And if you monitor HRV, you can look at that. But we wanted to establish this freaking brain body connection, because so much, like you mentioned earlier, so much of exercise and fitness is about weight loss, is about looking good. Especially, in some of the, as you get tougher and more of an athlete in some of these sports like CrossFit, cycling, Ironman, it's about numbing out and disconnecting. And, pregnancy asks you, just like you said, to come inward. And
Yeah.
if you have that disconnect with your body, how are you going to trust your body? How are you going to trust and then listen to your body in labor, in the birth experience? So it's
Yeah.
like, let's
Yeah.
put it all together and embrace it all.
Yeah. If not to dissuade people from working with you, but if they had any, but if I were to pick two types of training, and it was one was like a restorative yoga practice where we're focusing on mobility and maybe we are doing a couple little strength movements in there versus jumping into CrossFit and hitting it hard
Yeah.
6 days a week. I'm actually going to I'm going to say, that restorative yoga for you is probably good, especially if you're a
Right.
type of person who's just go, go, go all the time. Now that
Right.
you're pregnant, we may need to actually completely shift our priorities here and train you based on your experience and needs for this birth process. So what I love about BirthFit
Absolutely.
is that you guys really do customize it. You really personalize it and meet a person where they're at.
We try, we do our best. And I appreciate you saying that, because it is, each pregnancy, each birth, every postpartum, all of it's a different experience. And, for the longest time, people were asking me to put the programming online. And I was like, I don't think I could do that, because like you just said, it's every experience is unique and it needs to be customizable. But we try to give people the tools, and share a bit of the BirthFit philosophy in our education and stuff. And if they have that, then they can start to kind of customize their own training and have a little autonomy for their training and their bodies in that way. But yeah, like some people, especially if they're more type A and maybe they're, vice president of a company, they might not need spin or CrossFit or running every day. They might need just walking and the BirthFit basics,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about BirthFit basics. Here's the scenario. Somebody has very, very limited time. Oftentimes find myself in this position. Very limited time. I've got some dumbbells. I've got some kettlebells. Maybe I have a barbell. Who knows? What's like the one movement that you feel is like, I'm able to train today. I don't have the time to train, but I want to get some really good bang for my buck. What is like one movement that you think most people should be doing, regardless of pregnancy status?
Yeah, I think it's the squat. I think the squat, is kind of it's everything. It's a full body range of motion, strength, movement, and for I think I have a bias towards it, because I tore my ACL in high school, and then my rehab did not focus on gaining range of motion back. So, you know, as I was finishing chiropractic school, I realized that I could not squat below parallel. My, hip extension was terrible. So since I discovered that, I had been working on that, forever. But, I believe it's Ina May Gaskin says, squat 300 times a day to prepare for birth. You don't have to squat 300 times a day, but
It's a lot of squats.
but if you can, try to mix in some squats, throughout your day, so you're not sedentary. I do believe we are, a lot more sedentary than our ancestors were, and that's going to affect the position of the pelvis and therefore
Sure.
the position of the baby. And if you have Zoom calls, if you're working from home, if you're at an office where you sit all day, every hour, just get up and do 10 squats. If you're somebody like me that could not squat below parallel at one point, squat to a chair, squat to a box, give yourself a target and make that target get lower and lower each week. I think some women prefer, birthing in a squat. So it's like one of the most useful positions. And I'll share this funny story. When I went to Africa, Tanzania, whenever it was like 2005, and got off the plane, got on a bus, and then we stopped at a pit stop to use the bathroom. And I was like, oh, thank God, I got to use the bathroom. And so I went in to go pee, and lo and behold, I had to squat. And I was the worst squatter there. Like, oh, stuck out like a sore thumb. They're like, she is definitely not from here.
Yeah. I'm sure it was the squat that gave it away, Lindsey. Yeah.
Oh man, but I was like, this is something I got to work on. So the squat is definitely one of our BirthFit basics movements, and you mentioned the BirthFit basics. Those are 15 movements and poses that we came up with based on developmental kinesiology from DNS, the Prague School of Rehab, and then also FRC, which is functional range conditioning. And these movements and poses are designed to be a conversation with your body. So if all you did was 5 to 10 reps of these a day, it takes 20 minutes or less. And that goes such a long way. And then in the postpartum side of things, these are the movements that we introduce first. And we start, obviously not with 5 or 10 reps, but we start with like 1 to 3 reps. And how does this position feel? Can you breathe in this position? Can you utilize a stability breath with dead bug? And so we start building back up to the BirthFit basics, and then go back into regular general strength and conditioning. But
I love that.
yeah, the squat is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I'd probably have to. I waffle between the squat and like a really heavy deadlift because it just hits my nervous system in such a way. But well, gosh, I have a lot more questions, but we're already running out of time. The one thing I wanted to encourage people to think about here, that we don't have to go deep into conversation around it, but beyond just preparing yourself for birth, women who exercise, especially if they start exercising before birth, they tend to have less complications in their pregnancy. So if you want to have an autonomous birth, being able to hire a midwife, have a home birth, heck, have a free birth, for all I care. If you don't want to end up basically in the hospital with a doctor telling you what he's going to do or she's going to do to you in order to, quote, keep you and your baby safe, and you don't feel like you have any real grounds for making any decisions for yourself, even though you do maintain the right to say no and all of that. We won't get into that right now. Exercise is the one thing that has been clinically demonstrated to reduce everything from diabetes in pregnancy, hypertension in pregnancy, C-section, prolonged pregnancy, prolonged labor, perineal lacerations, especially when you couple good movement patterns with adequate nutrition. Your postpartum recovery speeds up. Your likelihood of postpartum depression and blues goes down. Exercise is truly kind of like the silver bullet for a variety of things that go wrong in our culture in birth. Do you want to comment on that at all?
No, I mean, well, yes, but yes and no. You
No, I
absolutely
disagree.
nailed it. Like, you said it so good. But like, if start a movement practice before, because the benefits, I mean, they're at least cumulative. And, what some studies that are starting to look at with HRV, which is heart rate variability, that space between each heartbeat, right? And for me, we test this in our clinic. We test, like, if somebody has an Oura ring or a Whoop, you can track your HRV, a Garmin watch, whatever. What they're discovering is that a woman that her HRV returns to her pre-pregnancy HRV or better somewhere between like 6 to 10 weeks postpartum. So what that is saying, what I take away from that is she has become a fitter version of herself. So the effects of pregnancy, like, you're doing work, and why not start doing work? Why not practice fitness before you actually become pregnant?
Yeah, totally. I'm totally with you there. There was a good book that you and I both know. It's by James Clapp and another.
Yes.
Maybe not another doctor, but she is maybe a chiropractor or something. I can't remember, but they together wrote a book called Exercising Through Your Pregnancy. I think that's a really good primer for people that want to see what the literature says. Unfortunately, a lot of the data is actually over 10 years old. People aren't
It's such an
studying.
old book.
It's so old. Yeah. So a lot of people are like, it's not applicable. I'm like, it's definitely applicable. We just
Yeah,
we aren't asking these questions anymore.
right.
Unless you're, you or me or one of your BirthFit coaches.
Yeah.
In wrapping up, I wanted to really clarify that, when I was flying my banner that I described, saying we need to customize workouts to the phase of your menstrual cycle, there are 4 poorly distinct phases, let's say. But as you go through that cycle, everything from your nutritional needs to your movement patterns
Yes.
to your sleep, needs to when you feel horny, I mean, when you're most
Yeah.
attracted to your partner, all of this stuff changes. So there are a lot of people in the wellness space, in the biohacking space. I fucking hate that term because you're not going to hack this and make it better than the way that the powers that, the creator, spirit, source, God,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, created this incredibly well orchestrated system. When you go to a trainer who's not trained to specifically understand where you are in your cycle and how to modify the workout and your lifestyle programming, you're going to potentially put yourself at risk of injury, risk
Totally.
of making things worse. So what I would so what I would recommend people do is find yourself a coach, whether it's at BirthFit, and there's really nobody like BirthFit, but
Yeah.
go to BirthFit, find somebody who is a trainer but is actually trained to focus on your programming and customizing it
Yeah.
depending on where you are in the month, in the quarter, in the year, and that's going to serve you so much better. So without further ado, would you tell people, Lindsey, where people can find you?
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yeah, so birthfit.com is the easiest place to find us. We also have a directory on there for BirthFit coaches and leaders. And I'm not sure when this episode will be aired, but we do have a BirthFit coach course. And the spring cohort is now literally opened this week. So coaches, personal trainers, any kind of movement instructor is encouraged to take that course. And then they have the knowledge for life. They can take it with them and do whatever they want with it. But you can find somebody in the BirthFit directory or take the courses yourself to empower you. You can find us on Instagram, same thing, BirthFit. And then we do have a YouTube page, BirthFit, where, like I mentioned, the BirthFit basics, you can find those for free on there. We have a ton of movement videos, insight, kind of 1-minute clips on there. There's tons of resources on YouTube. So those are like the 3 places to find us.
You guys are doing great work. Thank you. And you guys are also, I only align myself with certain brands that I really believe in, and you guys are sponsoring the podcast, full disclosure.
Yeah.
But that's not why you're here. You're here because you're doing really, really great work. And for listeners of the show, I think we'll have some goodies for them as well that I can read in the outro. But you haven't talked enough, I think, about your B community, which is a community by women for women. I just spoke in webinar format for your group of individuals. Can you make say a couple of things about that real quick?
Yeah, so B Community is our place where fitness, education, and connection meet. And this is our monthly membership option. So if you're pregnant, not pregnant, whatever, you can join this community. It's for women by women. So there's the only dudes we allow in there are the guest speakers. But this is an awesome place where, if you have questions about mom life, if you have questions about lactation, what snacks are the best? How do you work out with 2 kiddos? I love the chat section because people will chime in about this information and what's worked for them, may not work for you, but you're surrounded by women that want to be the best versions of themselves and probably living a very similar lifestyle where they care about health, they care about fitness, and they care about, the nourishment and nutrition and what goes into their bodies and their families' bodies. So B Community, it's only $24.99 a month. And, I think that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening, Code Beloved will get you the first month free. So we want to drive as many people there as possible because, like I said, there are very few organizations that have the chops to do this, but also they really do approach pregnancy through a personalized lens. Or I should say training women through a
Yeah.
personalized lens, especially in pregnancy and postpartum, because this is an area that is sorely lacking in coaches that are actually good at coaching you, the
Totally.
pregnant or postpartum woman. So thank you, Lindsey. Thank you so much for coming,
Well,
Dr. Lindsey.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to know you, and I'm just so glad that we've been connected in these recent
Yeah.
years because we have a lot of mutual friends. And next time in the Austin area, I'll go and get a workout in at the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. We must meet up in
We
person.
must absolutely. All right, take care, Lindsey.
Thank you.